Welcome to the Commodities Institute podcast. I am Emily Costa, and it is a pleasure to have you with us on this Monday, February 23rd, 2026. We are standing at a fascinating crossroads in the global markets today. From the marble halls of the Supreme Court in Washington to the iron ore mines of Brazil and the high-tech corridors of New Delhi, the landscape for raw materials is shifting under our feet. Today, we are going to unpack a series of massive developments that are redefining how energy, metals, and food move across the globe. We have spent the last 24 hours analysing the data, and it is clear that the old rules of the trade war are being rewritten in real time. Let us start today with a major geopolitical shift in the metals sector. Over the weekend, we saw a significant deepening of ties between two of the world's largest emerging economies. Prime Minister Narendra Modi of India and President Luiz Inácio Lula da Silva of Brazil have officially signed a mining and minerals pact. This is a strategic masterstroke for India, which is currently wrestling with an insatiable domestic demand for steel as it aggressively expands its infrastructure. The goal here is ambitious. They want to push bilateral trade beyond $20 billion within the next 5 years. Currently, that figure sits at around $15 billion, so we are looking at a 33% increase. Brazil, as many of you know, is a titan in iron ore production. For India, this isn't just about getting raw materials, it is about securing the critical minerals and technology needed to sustain industrialization for the next decade. There was also very interesting rhetoric from President Lula regarding trade being conducted in their own local currencies rather than the United States dollar. While he dismissed the idea of a common BRICS currency, the move toward de-dollarization in the commodities space is a trend we simply cannot ignore. Staying with metals, there is a quieter but perhaps more critical battle happening in the world of rare earths. For a long time, the West has been trying to break China's chokehold on the minerals needed for permanent magnets, the things that power everything from electric vehicle motors to defense systems. We are seeing a fascinating development with MP Materials, the American national champion in this space. Currently, their deal with the Department of Defense uses a floor price mechanism to protect them from price drops. But here is the catch. The reference price for that deal is still set by Chinese price reporting agencies. Basically, even when we are trying to build an American supply chain, we are still using a Chinese yardstick to measure its value. However, there is an escape clause in that contract. The Department of Defense can switch to a Western price index if a reliable one emerges. We are seeing the CME Group and the Intercontinental Exchange looking at rare earth futures contracts as we speak. It reminds me of how lithium evolved. A few years ago, the lithium market was totally beholden to Chinese exchanges, but now the CME lithium contracts have seen volumes grow by 37% in the last year alone. This is the blueprint for Western rare earth independence. You don't just need the mines, you need the market architecture to price the goods yourself. Now let's pivot to a massive story breaking in the energy and legal world. On Friday, the United States Supreme Court struck down a series of trade tariffs originally imposed by the Trump administration. This is a huge win for energy infrastructure. Think about companies like Venture Global. They build liquefied natural gas plants in pieces in Italy and then ship them to the United States for final assembly. Those tariffs were essentially a tax on their own supply chain. One executive I follow, Cam Hewell of Premium Oilfield Technologies, noted that his company was bracing to pay $5 to $6 million in tariff taxes this year alone. Now that cash is freed up for research, development, and employee raises. However, don't think for a second that this means the trade war is over. The Supreme Court did not touch the 50% tariffs on steel and aluminum. Furthermore, the administration is already hinting at a new 10% global tariff that could last for 150 days. It is a game of regulatory cat and mouse, and for producers, it makes long-term budgeting an absolute nightmare. While we're on the subject of liquefied natural gas, the global flow of the fuel is telling a tale of two continents. In Asia, spot prices have actually been drifting lower, hitting about $10.60 per million British thermal units. This seems strange when you consider the tensions in the Middle East and the record-breaking demand we are seeing in Europe. But the reality is that China, the world's biggest buyer, has been shunning the spot market. They have had a mild winter, and they are finding it much cheaper to rely on pipeline gas and long-term contracts. This has left a gap that Europe has been more than happy to fill. Europe's gas inventories are sitting at only 32% capacity, which is well below the 5-year average of 49%. To fill that hole, they are importing record amounts of LNG, mostly from the United States. In fact, US exports are expected to hit over 11 million tons in March, which would be near an all-time record. It is a massive 26% jump compared to last year. The United States has essentially become the primary energy guarantor for Europe, replacing the Russian pipeline gas that once dominated the continent. This brings us to the intersection of energy and technology. We are seeing a very controversial move from the Environmental Protection Agency. They are rolling back clean air regulations that limit mercury and other toxins from coal-fired power plants. Why? Because the demand for electricity is absolutely skyrocketing due to the expansion of data centers used for artificial intelligence. We are in a situation where the government is declaring an energy emergency to keep aging coal plants running. The EPA argues that reverting to older standards will save utilities between $69 million and $78 million a year, but health organizations are sounding the alarm. They point out that the stricter 24/24 standards would have achieved $300 million in health benefits by reducing exposure for infants and children. It is a stark reminder of the trade-offs being made in the race for technological dominance. We want the AI revolution, but that revolution requires a staggering amount of baseload power, and right now, coal is the emergency solution being pulled off the shelf. Let us turn our gaze toward agriculture, where the Supreme Court's tariff decision is creating some unexpected friction. For weeks, there has been talk of China making a massive purchase of 8 million metric tons of US soybeans. But now that the tariff hammer has been taken away from the president, analysts are wondering, why would China buy from the US when Brazilian beans are so much cheaper? Brazil is currently in the middle of a massive harvest, and without the threat of new tariffs forcing their hand, Chinese state buyers like Sinograin have very little incentive to pay a premium for American soy. This is a tough blow for American farmers who are facing their 4th straight year of low profits. The Department of Agriculture is stepping in with $11 billion in bridge payments, but that is a temporary fix for a structural problem in global trade. Finally, we have to look at the sugar industry, which is facing what many are calling a perfect storm. It isn't just one thing, it is a combination of new federal dietary guidelines calling for zero added sugars, stricter school meal standards, and the explosive rise of weight loss drugs like GLP-1s. Usage of these drugs jumped from 12% to 18% in just over a year. The Sugar Association is pushing back, arguing that there is a lack of evidence that these specific restrictions will improve public health, but the regulatory momentum is moving against them. New school standards alone could cut sugar demand by over 130,000 short tons. Between the Make America Healthy Again movement and the clinical success of new medications, the domestic demand for sweeteners is facing its most significant challenge in decades. It has been a whirlwind 24 hours in the markets. We are seeing a world where old trade barriers are falling, but new ones are being built out of currency pacts and environmental rollbacks. Whether it is the first cargoes of condensate leaving Saudi Arabia's Jafurah plant or the wheat tenders being issued by Algeria and Turkey, the common thread is a desperate search for stability in a very volatile era. Thank you for joining me today. I hope this deep dive helps you navigate the complex currents of the global commodities market. If you've found this episode valuable, be sure to subscribe, share, and leave a review. I'm Emily Costa, and this has been the Commodities Institute podcast.